strange mystery would land in the Cook County Sheriff's Office. They were tasked with identifying the remains of a nameless person with amnesia. In life, he called himself Seven, but he turned out to be a biological woman. Who was Seven, and why could she not remember anything about herself? It was a particularly cold day in Chicago, Illinois in 1976 when Denise Plunkett was getting ready to go to work at the hospital. She lived in a shelter at St. Francis's Catholic Worker House. They helped people back on their feet while also serving as a soup kitchen. As she was leaving, she saw someone unusually curled up on the porch. It looked like a middle-aged man wearing a camouflage jacket and an aviator cap under the chin. When she got close, she realized it was a woman. This encounter was so strange that even now at 83 years old, Denise Plunkett remembers it. The individual referred to themselves in the third person and avoided answering personal questions about their origin. When asked about their name, they would simply respond with either Mr. Seven or he is a number, not a name. His name is Seven. The reason behind this strange behavior remained unknown. Her initial assessment that Seven was a man was also due to the fact that this person had thick fingers and wide-set shoulders, almost like a man. There was also the army-style jacket. Could she be military? The people at the worker house did consider this possibility as well. But Seven was a woman, so why the disassociation with themselves? People usually refer to themselves in the third person due to mental health problems. During Denise Plunkett's time working with Seven at the house, there were suspicions of potential mental health issues. Yet Seven declined assistance. Denise lived at the worker house until 1983, but cared for Seven deeply. Together with some other members and management, they tried to get Seven's mental health evaluated. Seven would not cooperate. Despite this, Seven swiftly assumed a prominent role within the household. Everyone discovered she was an excellent cook, as if she had been a chef all her life. She became useful, making beans, rice, dishes, and pasta casseroles almost daily. Seven's skills made her popular, since the neighborhood was home to a majority of the homeless community. Several organizations actively funded soup kitchens or shelters for people living in less fortunate circumstances. Soon, people began to flock to the St. Francis Catholic Worker House. It was fairly a new shelter, built only in 1974, but Seven contributed to its popularity. People would stand in lines for Seven's cooking, sometimes over 100 people for one single meal. The residents accepted Seven for who she was. For over 20 years, Seven lived at the housing shelter, often seen smoking on the porch. She mostly hung out with men and even chose to sleep in the men's quarters. People suspected perhaps Seven knew exactly who she was, but chose not to speak about it. Or maybe it was amnesia brought on by severe emotional trauma. But one thing they knew for certain: she would tell her story when she was ready. Sam Guardino, an uptown social worker, tried working out Seven's mystery, but he accepted Seven for who she was. 27 years passed, and Seven remained at the house. She spoke of childhood memories of visiting the Indiana Dunes, a national park along Lake Michigan. She could distinctly recall a family, but not exactly a face to the name. She was also a big Cubs fan and would watch all games on the communal television or listen to the game on the radio. As long as she could remember, she had supported the team. But in 2003, one of the residents called an ambulance when they found Seven unconscious in the hallway. When she was rushed to the hospital, doctors discovered she was in a severe diabetic shock. The worker house would not be able to keep up with the medical expenses of a diabetic person. She required monitoring, insulin, and care. By now, Seven looked like she was in her 60s or so. It was hard to judge because she had the kind of face that could be anything between 35 to 60, smooth, calm, but gray-headed. Since Seven did not legally have a name or social security number, Chicago police were called to the hospital. Chicago PD launched a found persons report. They attempted twice to take her fingerprints, but Seven's fingers were deemed unreadable. They were severely disfigured. This usually happens to burn victims or the elderly. The mystery kept getting deeper. Was Seven perhaps a survivor from a fire incident? Seven's photos were circulated to other Illinois police departments and law enforcement agencies. Initially, it appeared that they found the person, named Skevin, but that turned out to be a false alarm because the person had perished in a car crash. When going through missing persons, online web sleuths thought she could be the missing teen from Cook County, Mary Ann Switalski. Mary Ann was last spotted at a carnival held at St. Priscilla's Catholic Church in Chicago on July 15, 1963. Just 2 days after she vanished, her parents received a letter. It was postmarked from Oak Park, Illinois. Though seemingly in Mary Ann's handwriting, the letter bore a different writing style. It reassured her family of her well-being and expressed her intention to earn money to support them. However, no further communication followed. There are suspicions that Mary Ann might have been coerced into joining a door-to-door sales group destined for California, or perhaps she had been in some kind of accident. She certainly matched Seven's features. They had the same eyes, nose, and gentle smile. Both had a strong-set bone structure, seemingly of Polish descent. But there was no way to be certain. Seven was described as a heavy-set woman with few teeth, with one noticeably large front tooth. She had short white hair, blue eyes, and a light complexion. Authorities overlooked gender identity. They relied solely on biological gender, despite Seven's statements. The police report mentioned, Seven believes she is a male. A medical exam showed that Seven is female. Shortly after, the investigation into Seven's identity was abandoned. The police report concluded she has no last name and cannot recall her past before 27 years ago. There is no information on relatives, and she currently lacks a social security number. Without a positive match for identity of next of kin or any family at all, Seven ended up as a ward of the state. She was placed in a nursing home in Lake Michigan. Years later, in 2012, the Chicago Tribune ran a story on some of the unidentified adult wards of the state. They mentioned Seven as well, but nobody came looking for her. And then, 3 years later, in 2015, Seven passed away at Apex Hospice Administrator on November 18th. She appeared to be in the later decades of the century, anywhere between the late 70s to early 80s. The medical examiner's report stated heart disease as the main cause of demise. It was brought on possibly by her diabetes and dementia. In November of 2015, the examiner had been successful in taking some fingerprints. This could be because post-mortem, the moisture content in the skin of a deceased person decreases over time. This can result in clearer and more defined fingerprints, compared to those taken from living individuals where moisture can interfere with the process. It is also possible that there was a mix-up or incompetence, as there were only 2 previous attempts to take Seven's prints. Whatever the case, the office ran her fingerprints in the police databases as usual. There was no match for a person with a criminal record. She was laid to rest at the edge of the Mount Olivet Catholic Cemetery in Chicago, in the section for unidentified people. Her grave was marked by a cement cylinder in the ground with the number 04985. The medical examiner had marked it as the 4,985th case of the year. And so it appeared 7 would be forgotten by the world, while she lay nameless but numbered. But 7's case would prove to be the most unusual cold case to land in the Cook County Sheriff's Office. Sheriff Tom Dart's office became quite famous for working on cold cases since they identified victims of the notorious serial perpetrator John Wayne Gacy. It became a specialty of them to find missing women in the state. Officer Dart commented, "We never had anything like that before. This one is different, and it just keeps getting more different." His office typically works on cases that have been cold for at least 3 years. They do not want to interfere with open, ongoing investigations, so they started working on it in 2021. They ruled out foul play or becoming a victim at someone's hands with the medical examiner's report. They ran 7's fingerprints in a nationwide database such as federal and military databases. And finally, after years of a nameless existence, 7 had a name and was not merely a number anymore. Her fingerprints matched with Reba Caroline Bailey, enlisted in the Army. Investigators discovered Army records from 1961 belonging to Reba. They then searched for her relatives from the 1970s. They found 5 siblings who had passed away, with the most recent being a sister in 2007. Additionally, they found several nieces and nephews who were alive, a marriage record, and evidence of difficult events that would help them understand her life. Reba had lived a life before she went missing in the 1970s. Reba's living relatives and next of kin were mostly nephews and nieces who lived in Florida, Alabama, and Illinois. Most of them never had a chance to meet her, but they had indeed heard of Aunt Reba who had gone missing. It was part of the family folklore, a story they told children when they all gathered, testing out theories, speculating about what had happened to her. While all of Reba's 6 siblings are deceased, she has more than half a dozen nieces and nephews. Rick Bailey, a Florida funeral home director, was going about his day when he got a call from Cook County Sheriff's Office. He was in absolute shock when they explained about his long-lost aunt's demise. Richard was named after his father, who had passed in the year 2000. 15 years before his younger sister passed away. The 65-year-old Richard explained that his father had tried to look for his little sister for many years. He would have been overjoyed to know she was alive and well, loved and cared for. Richard Jr. and other relatives have helped investigators learn more about Reba's early years. Born on May 19, 1940, in the town of Danville, Illinois, it made sense why Reba had memories of going camping. The town is famous for outdoor enthusiasts who like sports such as biking, hiking, camping, and fishing. It is a well-known tourist spot featuring the great outdoors. Reba was the daughter of a carpenter named Edward Franklin Bailey. They had to move houses often for his work. The family changed their address multiple times from Illinois to Alabama. When Reba was only 10 years old, she lost her mother in a devastating car wreck. Reba, her elder brother Richard, and their father were severely injured. According to an October 1950 article, her father reversed his car to pick up a random suitcase he saw lying beside the highway. A speeding vehicle then crashed into their car. Reba's mother, Edna Bailey, 46 years old at the time, was pronounced deceased at the hospital. Reba's photo does not appear in the yearbooks of public or private Catholic schools in Danville. The building in Chicago's Gold Coast, where 1950 census records show her family lived, no longer exists. Her name also does not appear in a nearby high school's yearbooks. Reba was employed as an elevator operator at a private club and as a sales clerk in a department store. Military records report that Reba loved swimming, bowling, and golf. She also had a passion for photography. When Reba was 20 years old, she was enlisted in the Women's Army Corps, serving in Alabama, Texas, and California. She was awarded a medal for good conduct during the time she served. Then, in 1962, Reba found love. She met John Henry Bilberry, also working for the Army in California. A year older than her, John was born on July 6, 1939, in Hamilton, Texas. Reba was honorably discharged from the Army due to marriage. There are no records for Reba and John's divorce, so it is safe to say the couple remained married until she possibly went missing. But 14 years later, in 1976, records show John got remarried. In Clark, Nevada, Reba's husband tied the knot with Donnie Ann Ralston on the 1st of September, oblivious to his wife being alive. Reba would be found the following month in October 1976 by Denise Plunkett at St. Francis's Catholic Worker House. 1976 is also the year in which her father passed away. John Bilberry passed away in Brown, Texas, when he was only 49 years old in 1989. He was buried in Zephyr Cemetery in Brown, Texas. John's new wife and 2 siblings were not alive anymore either, so there was no way to ask about Reba. Little is known about her discharge from the military, except for the rumors and myths in the family. The family talked about how Reba once visited relatives in Arizona, and sometimes they would visit her in Chicago. But something had changed. She had started taking illegal substances and was an alcoholic. She even began dressing as a man and calling herself a man. It is said that there were fights between the husband and wife, as he was not so accepting of her new lifestyle. But all that is hearsay, since nothing of the sort was documented and no divorce lawyers were involved. One relative in particular was convinced that this was the aunt they had been searching for all these years. Amanda Ingram, the family's official historian, was keen on documenting the family tree as it grew. One missing piece had always been the lost sister her grandfather had been searching for. She looked at Reba's photographs from the time she identified as 7 and realized there were certainly some recognizable Bailey features. Her face was long, and she had prominent teeth, especially the one that protruded. But in a button-down shirt and hair cut very short, Reba could have easily been one of her grandfather's brothers. Amanda keeps all census records and photographs on their family's website. She wanted to know more about this aunt, to document her journey and where she ended up. "It is kind of like an onion," Amanda said. "You keep peeling it back and hopefully you find the story you wanted to know." Reba's eldest sister was Virginia Bailey, born in 1920 and deceased in 2007. Then there was her brother, Edward Bailey, who passed away when he was a year old. Then came her brother William Franklin Bailey. He was born in 1927 and passed away in 1992. Peggy Bailey, another sister, did not make it past her second year. Richard Lewis Bailey, who was in the car crash with Reba's mother, passed in 2000. He was born in 1934, so he was the closest to any of the siblings with Reba. Another infant was born after him, but only made it to 3 years before she passed away. And then it was Reba Caroline Bailey, born on May 19, 1940. Reba's surviving family members, who have learned more about their great-aunt's life in later years, have found comfort in the fact that she was comfortable and loved. "We know she was cared for," Amanda Ingram commented. That is the best that my grandfather could have ever asked for. All these years, the Baileys thought Reba had been kidnapped, assaulted, or perhaps was living on the streets. It is still unclear as to what happened to her after her military discharge and whether she fought with her then-husband. Family members are left with a lot of questions about Reba's life. Did she have children? What became of her marriage? And even about their aunt's gender identity. The reasons behind her disappearance from their lives remains a mystery. Family stories hint at a possible disagreement with her father. Investigators have attempted to unpack the mystery of Reba's memory loss. They have explored theories ranging from potential brain damage caused by the car accident that tragically claimed her mother's life to the impacts of her military service. It was recently revealed that Reba was working at Fort Ord in California, a polluted former Army base, and Fort McClellan in Alabama, once the home of chemical weapons training. The federal government has acknowledged potential exposure to toxins. For nearly 8 decades, soldiers stationed at Fort Ord faced the grim realities of military service. It is possible that Seven's dementia and amnesia were caused by her time spent in service. No one has been able to figure out the meaning behind the name Seven. Investigators hypothesize that it was possibly related to military service or a birth order, as Reba was the youngest of 6 siblings. However, a discovery was recently made by Amanda, her great-niece, on Ancestry.com. She got potential matches for previously unknown relatives. This possibly included another Bailey sibling. Amanda recalled her grandfather occasionally mentioning the possibility of another baby in the family. Despite efforts to confirm this through public records in Illinois and some checks with the police, no evidence of another birth could be found. Nevertheless, if indeed there was another sibling, Reba would certainly have been the 7th Bailey child in the family, hence the title Seven. According to investigators, the next step would be to honor her with a new gravestone and military honors. Commander Jason Moran, who oversees the Missing Persons Unit, stated that the sole purpose of solving such cold cases was dignity. A body must be laid to rest with a name they lived by. Human identification is a mix of science and circumstance. Moran, who has been with the Sheriff's Department for more than 2 decades, said of his work, "It makes it very interesting to learn about who they were. The passage of time creates these difficulties, so we do the best we can to piece together who they were in life." Reba's case has the potential to establish a change in Illinois legislation. The Cook County Sheriff's Office is advocating for an alteration to the state's Missing Persons Identification Act. They propose that post-mortem fingerprints should be cross-referenced against all accessible state and federal databases. It must be expanded beyond solely law enforcement databases. This proposal aims for a more detailed search process at the time of passing, which could expedite the identification of individuals. With unidentified slain victims, an earlier match could help with investigations that are already affected by the amount of time that has passed. It could also possibly give closure to the loved ones of the deceased. In Reba's case, relatives could have held a memorial service and buried her where they wanted when she passed away. As a family, they made the choice not to disturb where she lay. According to Richard, they could have brought her remains to her family buried in Florida or Alabama. Her brother, Richard Bailey, was buried at Barrancas National Cemetery in Florida, as he was a Vietnam War veteran. However, transferring her remains there would have been a bit expensive, and they would need the entire family to pitch in. Richard Jr. said, "We decided as a family not to disturb her. At least we know where she is now." When told about the recent identification of Reba and her early years, Those who lived with Seven at the workers' house had a similar response. Denise Plunkett said, "It is absolutely mind-boggling." The sheriff's office is pursuing a new gravestone, military marker, and a memorial ceremony for Reba's life. Advances in forensic technology have once more aided in reuniting families. The mystery of Seven has been solved, and her loved ones find comfort in knowing what became of her. But why Reba went missing is still an unsolved mystery, buried with the elders of the Bailey family.